Would you like to possess such a supernatural ability? Just place your hand over someone's head. Then, a burst of blue flames erupts, turning the man into ashes and smoke. This boy specializes in dealing with superpowered individuals who have escaped legal sanctions. They are known as extrajudicial punishers. Their missions are conducted in secrecy. However, the recent scene was witnessed by a girl on the bus. The girl's name is Sakurakouji Sakura. At school, she excels in both academics and athletics, recognized as the school's beauty and goddess. She got off the bus to investigate and encountered a patrolling police officer on her way, taking him with her to the scene. But when she arrived at the park, it was as if nothing had happened. Only a trace of ash remained on the ground. The police officer thought it was just a trace left by a vagrant. She couldn't help but wonder if she had hallucinated. The next day, Sakura went to school. Unexpectedly, she recognized the boy beside the teacher as familiar. The boy was a transfer student, transferred into Sakura's class. His name is Oogami Rei. Seeing such a handsome boy, the girls began to gossip. Only Sakura stared at him with a complex expression. Rei had transferred to this school alone due to his parents' jobs. At this time, Sakura was certain that boy last night was him. The bell for the end of class rang. Sakura overheard classmates talking to Rei. She turned her head and stared at him. Then Aoba approached, thinking Sakura might be interested in Rei. When Sakura saw the glove on Rei's right hand, her expression grew complicated, and she stood up and walked over. Then Sakura expressed a desire to talk alone. Rei readily agreed, which surprised everyone in the class, thinking Sakura was about to confess to the new student. Word spread quickly from 1 to 10, 10 to 100. In a spacious area, Sakura was straightforward. She wanted to know where Rei was last night, what he was doing. Rei simply said he was working. Sakura was skeptical, continued to inquire what the glove was for, wondering if it was to hide injuries from setting fire and killing someone in the park last night. Their conversation, Aoba couldn't hear at all. Rei took off the glove. Only a ring was seen on his thumb. No injuries on his hand. Sakura was puzzled. Rei explained the glove was just an amulet. Hearing this, Sakura was somewhat perplexed, but ultimately apologized to Rei. However, Rei didn't take it to heart, hoping they could get along well as classmates in the future. Rei put on his glove and walked out. Then, Aoba rushed over, asking Sakura what was happening now. Sakura hadn't expected the unexpected turn of events, but Aoba thought Sakura had been dumped by Rei. Eventually, the news that Sakura had been dumped spread all over the school. Sakura's male fans exploded, wanting to tear Oogami Rei to pieces. Oblivious at this time, returned to the classroom. The recent incident made her very angry, so she was still not going to give up, determined to expose that guy's plot. But Aoba's thoughts were completely different. It was the first time she'd seen Sakura pursue a boy so persistently. Then, a scream from outside, both turned their heads towards it. It was the boys playing basketball. Rei easily broke through the defense with a handsome slam dunk. Is this the damn charm? While Sakura was absent-mindedly watching, chewing on a rice ball, Rei walked alone in the corridor. Sakura secretly stared at him from not far behind. During class, Rei was at the podium writing answers. Sakura watched him intently. After school, Sakura also kept an eye on him, until Rei was ready to change his shoes to leave. Suddenly, Aoba appeared beside Sakura. Rei had already disappeared. Sakura ran out of the school, prepared to continue chasing. Unexpectedly, Rei was just hiding nearby, watching. Sakura arrived at the park where the incident happened because she believed the saying, "The criminal always returns to the scene of the crime." But there were only children and elderly there. The image from last night resurfaced in her mind, her heart still filled with doubts. Then Sakura squatted down, took a rice ball from her backpack. A dog walked over, snatched the rice ball, and began to eat. Sakura tried to pet it, but the dog avoided her, running behind a person. That person was Oogami Rei. Hearing Sakura's voice, Rei complimented her accent for being neither coquettish nor pretentious. He thought it was quite cool. Sakura blushed at the comment. Rei called the dog, usually not very friendly with people, ran over to him and wagged its tail. Rei petted its head. Watching all this, Sakura remembered what Aoba had said at school. Rei seemed very gentle, and the words Rei had spoken to her, "Let's get along well as classmates." Watching Rei and the dog play happily, Sakura felt that Rei wasn't such a bad guy after all. The dog wasn't a stray. It belonged to a homeless old man who had been killed not long ago by a gang, identifiable by eagle tattoos on their bodies, a group that committed all kinds of evil. But their backing could make all troubles disappear, so none of them were ever punished, and the police turned a blind eye. Rei, with a smile, told Sakura, "To punish such guys, you don't need the laws of this country. Fight evil with evil." Sakura apologized to Rei for suspecting him. In an office, the two talked privately about Rei's affairs. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. That day after school, Sakura was still troubled by the events of that night. If it wasn't Rei, then who could it be? Could it really have been a hallucination? Later, Aoba invited Rei to go singing, but Sakura didn't plan to go. At that moment, Rei also said he had to work. Sakura was curious about what his job was. Rei only answered that he was a cleaner, and even took out a ringing phone to prove it. At that moment, Aoba was confused. She couldn't understand why their relationship had become so good. Later, Rei walked out of the classroom, took out his phone. The moment he put the phone to his ear, his expression changed. The call was to convey the day's work. The caller asked what he planned to do about Sakura. Rei turned his head to look at Sakura leaving the school. He smiled and replied to the caller, "Just clean it up like usual." Sakura, leaving the school, went to the park, feeding the dog. She tried to reach out and pet the dog's head, but the dog still avoided her. Just then, a scream came from not far away. Recently, a group of men, all bearing eagle tattoos, had bullied a weak homeless man. They wanted to know where their missing brother had gone. The homeless man had no idea, but he was met with another beating. Sakura happened upon this scene and signaled that she had already called the police. The delinquents laughed heartily, seemingly fearless. Their appearance terrified the little dog because they had killed its owner, the old man who had taken care of it. The leader told Sakura not to interfere. They were just worried about their missing brother. Hearing about the missing brother, Sakura's expression grew complicated. The leader noticed that Sakura seemed to know something and ordered his men to surround her. A man grabbed her shoulder, but instinctively, Sakura threw him over her shoulder. The next second, the group swarmed her, but she managed to hold her own. Sakura was skilled in various martial arts, but someone shocked her from behind with a stun gun. Paralyzed, she could only endure their beating. They tied her up and attempted to rip her clothes, but the little dog rushed over and bit one of the men's thighs. However, the next second, the dog was thrown away and kicked around by the people. Sakura struggled to get up and staggered to protect the dog. Normally, Sakura had tried to pet the dog several times, but it always shied away. Now, it actively licked her hand and let out a weak bark, seemingly signaling her to run. Just then, a kick sent Sakura flying. As the men slowly approached, suddenly a young man's voice came from behind. Sakura immediately recognized him as Rei. With just a touch, Rei could tell that the dog's internal organs and bones were damaged. The fact it was still alive was miraculous. To spare the dog further pain, Rei decided to help it pass away. His eyes became very sharp at this moment. The blonde thug was still taunting when Rei gave them two options: turn themselves in and face legal consequences, or disappear right there. Then, a group of foolish men was engulfed in blue flames. Sakura, witnessing everything, was not spared either. The next second, Sakura opened her eyes and found herself in her own bed. The images from the previous night haunted her mind. She hurried downstairs where her parents gathered around looking very worried. Sakura seemed to have lost her memory. Her parents had found her at the doorstep. The question arose: who had carried Sakura to her doorstep? On her way to school, Sakura visited the park again. There was no ash left. She didn't know what to do, and the images from last night attacked her mind again. Sakura regained her memory. Rei had intended to kill her, but why had he spared her? Entering the classroom at school, Rei noticed and smiled at her. Sakura, teeth clenched and trembling, couldn't take her eyes off him, even as Aoba greeted her. It wasn't until Aoba forcibly brought her face in front of her that she snapped out of it. Just as Sakura was about to speak about the previous night, Rei interrupted her and placed his gloved hand on Aoba's shoulder, causing Sakura to gasp, even hearing her own heartbeat. At that moment, her expression was one of sheer terror. Sakura's loud plea to stop grabbed the attention of many classmates. They began to speculate, wondering if there was a love triangle involved. However, Aoba was confused about what Sakura was trying to accomplish. It was just a hand on a shoulder. Rei took the opportunity to feign innocence. She suspected that Rei was trying to monitor her, deliberately withholding the truth. If she spoke out about what happened last night, Rei would burn her and everyone else. During the break, Aoba, as usual, came to hang out with Sakura. Sakura turned to see that Rei was following closely behind her. Not wanting to involve her best friend Aoba, Sakura chose to ignore her. At lunchtime, Sakura ate a rice ball alone while Rei watched her from the upstairs classroom. When Aoba came over to ask if she wanted to have lunch together, Sakura was initially glad to have such a good friend. However, seeing Rei's expression, she told Aoba to stay away from her. Confused and hurt, Aoba ran off. In the classroom, Sakura stood in front of Rei, wanting to talk to him alone. She then suggested they walk home together after school. Eager as she was, to others it seemed like a date after school. Rei smiled and agreed. Later, Sakura explained to Aoba that she would clarify everything after everything was resolved. Eventually, Aoba compromised. In an arcade, a boy with red hair sang while grabbing stuffed animals. Later, he was followed in the street. A little head peeked out to investigate, and the boy disappeared. She ran over to see what was happening. Suddenly, someone pushed her from behind. The little creature pushed the boy away and handed him an envelope with a photo inside. A job given to him by his superiors. Was he supposed to eliminate the man in the picture? Sakura brought Rei to a crowded place, thinking that Rei would be cautious and not use his powers easily. She then asked if Rei had killed those people. Rei admitted it directly, not intending to hide it, saying he didn't feel bad about cleaning up that trash. Sakura urged him to turn himself in, but Rei found the suggestion laughable. Sakura shouted Rei's name, startling a nearby baby. Confused, Sakura watched as Rei picked something up from the ground, crouched by the stroller, and handed it to the baby, instantly stopping the crying. Sakura was puzzled inside. She tried again to persuade Rei to turn himself in. Rei grabbed Sakura's head. Was he really about to burn her in public? The next second, she knocked off his glove, trying to escape. But Rei caught her, his fierce eyes bearing down on her. Sakura was terrified. What Rei did next baffled me. He pinched Sakura's face, which she slapped away. Rei had been observing her all day. If he was not mistaken, Sakura was a rare kind. Rei came from an organization called Codebreaker, which dealt with pests outside the law. Rei approached Sakura, asking her to name someone she wanted dead. Disturbing images flashed through Sakura's mind, but she insisted that no matter who it was, killing was absolutely not an option. She didn't even understand why she was so adamant about it. Sakura made a resolution then. She would always keep an eye on Rei from now on. He could accept it, but he hoped Sakura would remember that if she revealed his secrets, he would take care of her and everyone else involved. After this incident, Sakura returned home and just lay on her bed, not saying anything to her parents. They were very worried. Lying on the bed, Sakura couldn't forget Rei's threatening look and words. In another room, a man stood worriedly. He was concerned about the implications of involving someone like Rei in their plans. Another man, seated and calm, reassured him that safety measures would automatically activate should Rei lose control. Rei was walking on a bridge when his phone rang. It was a call inquiring about Sakura. Rei decided not to eliminate her because she was someone he couldn't ignite. Recently, a red-haired man had received a job. His target was the man in the photo. That day, the red-haired man launched an attack, but as the fog cleared, another man appeared, wielding ice spikes. The red-haired man used his powers, and the two locked eyes before both disappeared when the fog lifted fully. Sakura headed to school, where Rei had been waiting for a long time at the gate to observe her. At school, Sakura looked distressed because her shoe locker was stuffed with items. Opening the locker, she found it full of love letters from admirers. In the corridor, Sakura apologized to Aoba because she would have to go to and from school with Rei from now on. Aoba misunderstood, thinking Sakura and Rei were in a romantic relationship. Suddenly, one of Sakura's fans attacked Rei. Rei's hand moved slowly, but Sakura, sensing this, stepped forward to stop him. The classmates further assumed they were in a romantic relationship. When the school bell rang, it was Rei's turn for duty the next day. He needed to go to the student council room to get the duty log. Sakura offered to help him. On the way, they encountered a senior student named Fujiwara Nenane. Nenane was very fond of Sakura's physique, which Rei instantly understood. Nenane, feeling a kindred spirit, decided to share her secret with Rei. She took off her glasses, revealing her heterochromia. To Rei, Nenane at that moment reminded him of someone, and he almost acted on it, but was brought back by Sakura's call. Elsewhere, a blonde boy received a call to collaborate with someone. At that moment, he gave a mischievous smile. Back at school, Rei opened his locker to find a basket inside containing a job arranged by his organization. After hanging up the phone, he called out Sakura's name. She had been hiding by the door all along. To her surprise, Rei pulled out a puppy, the child of the little dog. Upon a closer look, its face and even its timid nature resembled the little dog's. Sakura, holding the puppy, began to cry. They then arrived at their destination. Rei took out a key provided by the organization and opened the door. As soon as he entered, he kicked the man in front of him, sending him flying. Inside, people were engaged in illicit dealings, all looking menacing. Despite the dangerous scene, Sakura wasn't afraid. She naively thought the nearby police would take legal action against the criminals. However, Rei's bold behavior provoked everyone, but eventually, the leader stopped them. Recently, Rei eliminated G Falcon. Forced to fend for themselves, the group had to sell their goods directly. The leader wanted to recruit Rei, as the bottled items they sold brought in exaggerated profits, quickly depleting the buyer's funds. They used it as bait, with humans as the prey. The man in front of them had already been hollowed out, his wife and daughter not spared either. The leader intended for Rei to deal with them, and even the police were in on it. Sakura believed this was wrong. Everyone laughed at her naivety. Without a word, Rei took care of everyone, but he was also injured, blood remaining on his hands. Later, the puppy found something in the room. Sakura opened the door, finding the debilitated man's family inside. She told the woman to leave, but the woman appeared very desperate until Rei ignited a deep-seated will to survive within her. Sakura couldn't determine if Rei's actions were good or evil. She called out to Rei and threw herself at him, feeling his warmth. Rei pushed her away with both hands, regretfully stating he couldn't understand anyone, nor did he believe anyone could understand him. Then, Rei punched Sakura in the stomach, knocking her out. Afterward, he approached a car downstairs. Inside was Chief Takada. After learning Rei's true identity, Takada fired a shot and quickly fled. On the road, Takada called Hitomi for help, but he was not willing to assist. At that moment, Rei jumped from another car. Just as he was about to use his powers, a helicopter flew overhead. A blonde-haired person jumped down from it, landing smoothly and launching an attack on the sedan. Not long ago, Rei arrived at the highest authority of the Codebreakers, Eden, which comprised 6 individuals with special abilities. The 6th member was Oogami Rei, codename Code 06. Rei urged them about a pressing matter. They then sent a photo to Rei's phone. The target was a politician, Tabata Shigeru, and the mission was to clean him. Rei wanted to know if he was connected to Hitomi. The person on the stage hesitated to speak further. Unable to bear it, Rei burned them, but it turned out they were just decoys. Rei then put on his gloves and left. Meanwhile, Sakura again slept at her home's entrance. This wasn't the first time, and her parents were worried. She made up an excuse that she had joined the mountaineering club and needed to practice camping outdoors. Her parents seemed to know she was lying because of her expression, but they silently believed her. Near her home, Sakura encountered a boy with golden hair and heterochromatic eyes. His name was Fujiwara Toki, and he had come to pick up Sakura for school. His code name was Code 04. Toki joked that Rei, after being scolded by their superiors, was probably hiding and crying. As Sakura recalled a memory, Toki claimed to be Rei's friend and knew everything about him. Sakura, suddenly excited, asked Toki to talk about Rei. She wanted to stop Rei's current actions. However, Toki felt it was inconvenient to discuss it there, so he took Sakura to a secluded park. They sat on a bench, chatting while the puppy watched. Their proximity grew closer until Rei arrived. In fact, Rei and Toki were not friends, and even had a somewhat unfriendly relationship. The people above were unsure about Rei for tonight's mission, so they had sent Toki to him. Two people who were like fire and water became partners. Toki mockingly warned Rei not to hold him back, and Rei, not one to show weakness, maintained his distance. They were ready to settle things here, and both unleashed their powers, engaging in a fierce fight. However, the next second, they found themselves unable to break free from Sakura's hold, until Toki cried out in pain, prompting Sakura to finally let go. They both fell to the ground, and that's when Sakura noticed that Toki's eye color was exactly the same as Nenene's. Toki then left alone. On her way, Sakura was filled with questions about the relationship between Rei and Toki and the meaning of losing form mentioned earlier. Then, a boy greeted Sakura and invited her for tea. The people around were used to this. He was Heike Masaomi, Sakura's senior. Sakura politely declined the invitation, and Heike was understanding. In the classroom, Sakura decided to confront Rei about these questions after class. Suddenly, she saw Toki downstairs and used feeling unwell as an excuse to go to the infirmary, but actually went to find Fujiwara Toki. Rei followed soon after. Toki and Rei hadn't exchanged many words before the tension escalated. Their trio was discovered by the homeroom teacher. Cleverly, Fujiwara Toki passed off as a student visiting the school. The teacher's attitude changed significantly because the uniform Toki was wearing belonged to a highly prestigious high school with Japan's top university entrance rates, a school fiercely competed over by children of major corporation executives. Thus, the teacher not only introduced Toki to the students, but also arranged a seat for him. At noon, Sakura invited Rei to discuss things over lunch, but Rei directly refused. She then called Toki to join her instead. In the corridor, Sakura hoped Toki could stop Rei's actions, but Toki knew that all codebreakers have their own agendas and wouldn't hesitate to dirty their hands to achieve their goals. Toki's subsequent actions were eye-opening as he casually touched women. Toki complained, wondering why his sister could do it and he couldn't. Sakura instantly realized that Toki was Nenene's brother. Just then, Rei appeared, claiming he came to ensure Sakura wasn't being deceived. Sakura followed him, wanting to learn more about Rei and the codebreakers. But when she opened the door, Heike Masaomi appeared. The next second, it was Nenene who rushed towards Sakura. When Toki saw Nenene, he left with a smile. Seeing so many people, Sakura gave up on questioning Rei about those matters. She then brought up Nenene's brother, but when she turned around, he had already disappeared. At that moment, Nenene claimed she had no brother. Recently, Rei and Toki had received a mission to eliminate the Tabata Shigeru family. That evening, Rei noticed someone following him. It was Sakura. She asked him about Toki and Nenene. It turned out that no one was supposed to know about the existence of codebreakers. Even if Toki had family, as long as he was a member, he was essentially on his own. Later, at the gate of a villa, they encountered Toki. Sakura was about to discuss Nenene with Toki, but he said he had lied. However, Sakura still firmly believed that Nenene was Toki's sister. Feeling that it was about time, Toki approached the door lock and disabled all the security systems with his ability to control magnetism freely. Their goal here was to eliminate Tabata Shigeru. The opposition was well prepared. Rei took off his gloves, and Toki was full of energy. Upstairs, a man opened the curtains and looked down. He was their target. The confrontation below was intense. However, when Toki controlled all the bullets and attempted to return them to their senders, Sakura suddenly lunged at Toki, not wanting him to kill anyone. Fortunately, the men in black only sustained minor external injuries. When Toki got up, a bizarre phenomenon occurred. One by one, the men in black turned to stone. They still couldn't escape death. Rei immediately recognized this as the work of a special ability. At that moment, the door burst open, and two individuals emerged, also wielding incredible powers. This was not surprising since this place was secretly conducting research on special abilities under government orders. The two attackers launched an assault, but were easily blocked by Rei and his group. The two brothers remained calm, praising their opponent's prowess. However, as the tubes on their bodies gradually darkened, the brothers chose to flee. Rei and his group chased after them. Inside a room, a small boy clutched at his clothing, and a man looked at him with cold eyes, saying, "You'd better be useful. Just then, the door opened, and the man was there to report an invasion by the codebreakers. He didn't lie because the codebreakers are also a government agency. Both Toki and Rei were acting on orders from the Prime Minister. Whether it's the Kageyama family or the Tabata family, no crime escapes their grasp. Rei opened a door to a room filled with children possessing special abilities. They had been gathered from various places and were undergoing various tests. What the government intended to do with them remained a mystery, but this was also a form of protection. After leaving the room, Rei was puzzled why the brothers' powers had suddenly disappeared. Could it be a loss of form? At that moment, the puppy seemed to sense something downstairs. It stopped in front of a door. Rei opened the door. The room was filled with blood-stained tools and an operating table. It was more a hell than a hospital. Suddenly, with the lights turning on, Tabata Shigeru and his assistant appeared. Tabata Shigeru was not only a national legislator, but also the head of the research here. Toki walked up to a wall and used his ability to carve out a hole, revealing many jars and containers. Sakura couldn't bear to look because they contained organs taken from children. The government hadn't authorized Tabata Shigeru to do this. It was his own initiative. Then, the two brothers reappeared, believing that children with inferior abilities should be eliminated, but their organs could still be useful. They claimed it was all for the benefit of humanity. Sakura disagreed with their view. A man damaged a water pipe, and Rei used his flames to evaporate the water. Toki quickly shielded Sakura and counterattacked. The bald man also showed no weakness. Seeing this, Toki grabbed Sakura and ran out of the room. The places attacked by the bald man turned to stone, even giving Toki, who possessed special abilities, trouble. Meanwhile, Abe was delusional about obtaining Rei's organs. Tabata Shigeru merely smiled slightly upon hearing this. The bald man attacked while mocking Toki. The bald man's ability was particularly troublesome for Toki. At that moment, Sakura noticed something odd about the heavy cases they always carried. Toki seemed to realize something. Abe struggled to cope and scolded the case with a bad attitude, threatening it to exert force. Rei seized the opportunity to attack, but was dodged by Abe. Rei's actions infuriated Abe. Seeing the case damaged, the bald man hurriedly used his abilities to defend. This behavior confirmed Toki's suspicions about the case. Toki intended to use his abilities to dismantle the case directly, but it was made of carbon fiber, which he couldn't destroy on his own. He was forced to manipulate the surrounding objects to specifically target the case. As the bald man, frustrated, prepared to unleash his ability, he suddenly found himself unable to use it. Toki took advantage of the bald man's distraction and launched an attack. Just then, a rock struck the case, causing it to fall and reveal its contents: a puddle of water and a small child. On the other side, Rei used his formidable power to defeat Abe. Having exhausted his strength, he angrily threw the case away. It turned out that the brothers' powers came from the children. Now, with the situation dire, Sakura tried to awaken the small boy, whose first words upon waking were a plea for them to kill those responsible. They had been harvesting the powers of children, sacrificing their lives in the process. The inferior children had their organs removed while still alive. The bald man, cornered and with no escape, was continuously beaten. Unable to bear the humiliation, he picked up a scalpel and charged forward, only to be killed in the end. However, no matter how much Sakura shouted, the small boy no longer responded. Meanwhile, there were cries for mercy nearby, but by the time Sakura arrived, it was too late. The little girl was content. Tabata Shigeru attempted to escape, but was tripped up by Toki waiting outside. Rei slowly approached, hand extended. Sakura was about to intervene to prevent Rei from killing more people, but Toki stopped her. Heroes can kill villains for justice, and Sakura's hesitant words could not reach Rei. Sakura thought of the small boy and girl, biting her lip, unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, Tabata Shigeru continued to berate Rei. Just as Rei was about to seize him by the head, a girl in a wheelchair appeared. She was Tabata Shigeru's daughter, Chisa. Toki falsely claimed Rei was a hero of justice. Chisa believed Rei was a superhero from her books, and decided she wanted to be a hero like him. It turned out that Tabata Shigeru used his position managing the research on abilities to find suitable organs for his daughter. Toki earnestly advised Tabata not to continue this way. He was ungrateful. She did not have much time to wait for organ donations. Rei felt this was no excuse to let other children die for Chisa. Tabata Shigeru did not believe he had done anything wrong. To him, what was wrong with a few dogs dying for Chisa to live? As Rei prepared to burn Tabata Shigeru, Sakura rushed forward and punched him in the face. She could not comprehend the act of trampling on other lives. However, her final punch did not reach Tabata Shigeru. Instead, Sakura hugged him tightly. His body was still warm, and she thought he was as warm as that child. No one deserves to be killed. At that moment, Tabata Shigeru was moved by Sakura's words, tears almost spilling from his eyes. But it was too late for him to turn back. Tabata Shigeru entrusted his daughter to Sakura, then pushed Sakura away and stood up, telling his daughter that the superhero's brother had come to subdue him. Chisa watched in despair as her father was burned alive. In anger, she threw a book at Rei and unleashed her ability. The attack didn't much affect Rei, and Chisa was left feeling incredibly frustrated. Rei said, "If you're frustrated, live on." He could only use hatred to encourage Chisa to survive. With a look of deep hatred, Chisa eventually passed out from exhaustion. Toki had already contacted the medical team, so Chisa was going to be okay. Outside, the assistant, making a phone call to report the situation, was unaware that Toki had been waiting for him. He asked the assistant to hand over the phone, but the assistant was hurriedly seeking help from the mastermind. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and Toki picked up the phone from the ground. As soon as the caller spoke, Toki knew it was Code 01, Hitomi. After the incident, the Prime Minister relocated the children to the 4th Research Institute. He hadn't expected Tabata Shigeru to commit such an act. At that moment, the curtains parted to reveal a man in a white hat. Ultimately, the whole incident was covered up by a fire. The Prime Minister watched the news when the phone rang. It was Toki requesting a meeting. The Prime Minister warmly welcomed Toki, even hinting it had been a long time since they had breakfast together. Toki, however, didn't indulge in small talk and went straight to the point. The Prime Minister seemed to have done quite some extreme things in the research of special abilities. He chuckled, saying he had no choice, but Toki did not respond and simply sipped his coffee. The Prime Minister then explained that all he had done was to lighten the codebreaker's burden. As a father, he was very aware of Toki's hardships and just wanted to fulfill some fatherly duties. As a member of the codebreakers, Toki had to forsake his family, so he did not acknowledge the Prime Minister as his father. The Prime Minister thought Toki was upset about the Nenene issue, and he expressed sorrow about it. Suddenly, Toki stood up, his gaze cold as he stared at the Prime Minister. They had an agreement. Toki would serve as the Prime Minister's hound, eradicating evil, but the condition was to not harm his sister, Nenene. The Prime Minister knew Toki had been meeting Nenene secretly and asked how Nenene was doing. Toki ignored the question and left alone. After Toki left, the Prime Minister's expression turned sinister. Toki also knew he was dealing with a despicable person. Elsewhere, Sakura was reading the newspaper, with Rei following her. She reflected on how the newspapers did not report the real facts, suspecting that it was the government's influence. Thus, no one would know the truth about what happened that night. Then, they were drawn to a motorcyclist. Rei approached her. She was Hachiuji Rui, delivering orders from Eden for Rei to be Sakura's bodyguard. However, Rei was intent on settling matters with Hitomi. Rui gave Rei a metaphorical hammer to wake him up and volunteered to investigate Sakura's situation, suggesting that there must be some secret behind assigning them as her bodyguards. Rui reminded Rei to be aware of the timing of entering a state of loss. Afterward, Rui rode off on her motorcycle, and they both headed to school. When Sakura opened the door, everyone seemed to be up to something. Even her close friend Aoba was hiding. When Rei saw the newspaper on the table, the classmates quickly made excuses to put it away. Rei sensed something was off. During an exam, Aoba passed a note to Sakura. Opening it, Sakura finally learned what they were hiding. The classmates who made eye contact with Rei avoided him. After the exam, Aoba and Sakura quickly ran into the girls' restroom, a scene Rei happened to witness. If Sakura revealed last night's secret, Rei would not hesitate to incinerate Aoba. In the corridor, Heike was savoring his coffee while reading a racy novel. The boy peered through the cracks in the wooden planks at the woman lying on the bed, and then he saw the figure of a female teacher with a thick rope, her face flushed, approaching step by step. Just as things were getting exciting, Ms. Kanda came along. She was there to persuade Heike not to read racy novels in the hallway. At that moment, Rei passed by, and Heike immediately noticed that Rei was about to enter the dead zone. After school, Rei went to retrieve his backpack from the classroom, but was blocked outside by the puppy and Sakura. There was noise inside, and Rei guessed that Sakura had spoken about his matters. When the people inside realized Rei was just outside, they tried to keep quiet, but Rei heard everything. Rei, not heeding her advice, forcefully pushed through. To his surprise, he was greeted by his classmates' welcome. Aoba went up to Rei to apologize for the late welcome party they had organized for him. They put a hat on Rei, something everyone had prepared together, and they also had gifts with their names and messages written on them. Rei didn't understand why everyone was doing this. The reason was simple. They were going to be classmates for the coming year, and they wanted to make it a joyful and happy experience. After the event, Rei and Sakura went to the rooftop. Sakura explained that she only found out about the party that morning and delayed Rei because everyone needed time to prepare. At that moment, Rei was reading the names on the paper. Sakura could see that everyone cared about him. Rei felt it was unnecessary. Just then, Sakura noticed him using his powers to burn the paper. She quickly grabbed the paper from him and extinguished the flames. Sakura was confused about what Rei was doing. Rei explained that he hated possessions because they remained after people died, so he was used to disposing of them quickly. He had memorized everything written on them, thinking if he forgot, they would surely annoy him to death. Therefore, Rei firmly stated he would never forget them. On a busy street, Toki walked alone, feeling very agitated. Suddenly, he experienced intense pain and discomfort. He staggered into a deserted alley. After Agent Kawamura sent a report identifying the target, there was no further contact, and now 43 agents were missing. The man who opened his eyes was Hitomi. Beside him on the sofa was Yukihina, first revealing a silver hand, followed by a group of men in black maintaining a static posture. Hitomi slowly stood up from the sofa, declaring his readiness to start a new world, then raised his electrified hand. Back at the school, everyone was packing up. The girls began gossiping about Sakura and her progress with Rei. At the moment, Sakura was quite satisfied because Rei had firmly remembered everyone's names. The matter seemed to be resolved. Suddenly, they witnessed an old man being pushed to the ground. Rei quickly ran down. The group of men in black appeared at the school gate, their bodies crackling with visible electrical currents. Rei was all too familiar with such a distinct characteristic. These people were definitely being controlled. Rei removed his black gloves and with a flick of his wrist, enveloped the incoming men in black with blue flames. Sakura looked on in disbelief as the burned men in black got back up, still accompanied by visible electricity and the sound of currents. Rei had realized earlier that their bodies were being manipulated. Before he could finish, his expression turned very uncomfortable, and he even struggled to stand. Sakura noticed something was wrong with Rei and ran over worriedly. Heike, who was not far away, witnessed everything but didn't have time to think. Rei pushed Sakura away with one hand as he faced the incoming men in black alone. At this moment, Rei was gasping heavily, unable to bear the sudden pain. Fortunately, the men in black attacking Sakura were taken down by a woman who, when she put on her glasses, Sakura realized was Ms. Kanda. The men in black charged again, but luckily, Kanda was quick to act. She immediately recognized this as Hitomi's power. She prepared to have Sakura flee, but just then they noticed some of the men in black heading towards the school building. Sakura sensed danger and realized they needed to warn everyone to take refuge. Rei struggled to his feet, not forgetting to tell Kanda to protect Sakura. He sprinted down the corridor and, with a swing of his hand, cast a line of blue flames, warning that anyone who crossed it would face consequences. The men in black didn't take it seriously and charged forward. Rei exerted all his strength to take down a group of them. Rei, fueled by what seemed to be the power of friendship, continuously used his abilities to drive back the men in black. When the men in black approached the door, Rei grabbed one by the forehead and blasted him with flames. After using up his ability, the world began to distort around Rei. his pupils constricted as he staggered along. The group of men in black before him slowly became blurred in his vision as they approached. Sakura and Kanda frantically called out Rei's name, and just as Rei seemed to lose consciousness, a voice came from the sky. He made a stylish landing, scattering the men in black. Then he quickly moved down the corridor. Rei recognized him. His name was Yuki. Heike's voice then reached everyone's ears, sounding like a school discipline committee member. Rei being pushed to such extremes was a matter for deduction of points, and Yuki, although arriving just in time and doing a rough job, also warranted a deduction. Yuki was confused by what Heike said, until he turned around and saw the men he had sent flying were getting up. Yuki then assumed a Chinese martial arts stance, ready to face his opponents. At this moment, Heike's hands were glowing, evolving into strands of light that bound the men in black. Subsequently, the men in black vanished into thin air. Yuki witnessed this scene and praised the ability as very powerful. At this point, Sakura caught Rei just in time as thunder rumbled in the sky and a drizzle began to fall. Sakura shouted loudly for Rei, but he did not respond to her. At this moment, Sakura recalled the little girl and boy from before. She thought Rei would end up like them and, with a sorrowful expression, screamed out for Rei. It was then that Heike explained it was the loss of form state. Sakura did not know what loss of form meant. Heike believed that this state was their destiny, an unavoidable fate for them. In an alley off a bustling street, a child with blonde hair had fallen into a coma. The child bore an uncanny resemblance to Toki, even wearing Toki's clothes. To ensure Rei's safety, Kanda suggested they quickly relocate as Rei's residence had been compromised. They had to consider a new safe location. Sakura volunteered her home, surprising both Kanda and Heike. Recently, Rei had entered this lost form due to overexertion. However, there was no need to worry as this form could only last a short while, needing just 1 day to recover. Sakura treated the lost form as something as trivial as hunger, but she had not realized that her senior was also a member of the Code Breakers. Sakura knew very little about Yuki. Kanda was an agent of Eden, tasked with supporting the Code Breakers. Sakura burst into laughter, finding it amusing that the seemingly upright Rei was ranked the lowest and needed support. Yuki, known as Code 03, had the ability to manipulate sound. At that moment, Yuki was sticking a sticker on Rei's face, visibly worried and hoping for Rei's swift recovery. Heike, Code 02, was not only a code breaker, but also responsible for evaluating everyone's ranking. Number 5 was the one who rode a motorcycle. When the topic shifted to number 1, Kanda's expression turned grave and changed the subject. Upon arriving at Sakura's home, Kanda, as the homeroom teacher, was very familiar with Sakura's family background. They were members of the notorious Japanese Yakuza group, Ghost Sakura. Sakura was the daughter of the gang leader Gutoku. Yuki was surprised, experiencing for the first time being treated as a friend. Sakurakouji Yuki, Sakura's mother, initially unaware of what had happened to Rei, quickly agreed to help after realizing he was an important friend to Sakura. In the hallway, Sakurakouji Yuki informed Sakura that another friend had arrived early and was waiting in the guest room. Upon entering the room, the sharp-eyed Yuki noticed something odd in the closet. They heard noises and discovered it was Toki. Heike immediately recognized that Toki had also entered his lost form, which manifested as him turning into a little brat. Kanda stayed in the guest room to care for Rei, while the others headed to the grand living room for a banquet. Along the way, their playful and close relationship was evident, and Sakura smiled. In the grand living room, Sakura watched everyone. Heike noticed Sakura's gaze and wanted to know why she chose to work in this field. In turn, Heike wondered about Rei's thoughts on the matter. Sakura, having walked this path alongside Rei, had witnessed his body covered in scars. She knew he fought to eradicate evil, yet Rei remained profoundly lonely. Suddenly, Toki appeared, visibly drunk. Heike's stern expression hinted at a possible deduction in Toki's score. In a mocking gesture, Toki lifted Heike's bangs, teasing him about his lack of eyebrows. At that moment, Yuki expressed his gratitude to Sakura for taking in Rei. Looking at Sakura in front of him, Yuki was reminded of Nyanmaru. Later outside, Yuki gazed up at the moon, muttering about protecting Nyanmaru, his obsession apparent. At the door, Heike used reading a color novel as a pretext to stand guard. Hiki shared with Toki what had happened at school that day, having observed everything from start to finish. The mastermind had a plan, directing men in black to split into two groups, one targeting Rei's team and the other targeting Sakura's team. Heiki couldn't understand why Hitomi chose to strike when Rei was present, nor could he grasp why Hitomi would divide the combat strength of his men in black. Toki agreed with Heiki's thoughts, suspecting Hitomi had another purpose. The next morning, Rei, who had been in his lost form, woke up. He knew that Hitomi was the puppeteer behind the men in black, the original code, Breaker's Code 01. Both Rei and Kanda were very familiar with this person. Meanwhile, Rui received orders from Eden to head to Sakura's house, gathering all the code breakers. Could there be a major event unfolding? Upon waking, Rei continuously stared at a samurai sword, vaguely recalling past memories. Sakura's father, Gutoku, approached, took the sword, and drew it. He lent the sword to Rei, hoping Rei would protect Sakura. Suddenly, lightning struck. Rei and Gutoku rushed out, opening the door to find their men collapsed on the floor. A man appeared in front, Hitomi, holding Sakura. Yuki, wanting to attack Hitomi, risked hitting Sakura. Hitomi capitalized on this, using his powers to knock Yuki unconscious, and then unleashed a powerful electric shock on Rei, who was blown away, sword and all. Before Hitomi could take a few steps, Kanda shot at him, her hand trembling slightly. Seeing this, Hitomi decided to give them a surprise. Heiki took the opportunity, while Hitomi was distracted, to bind his ankles with his power, flinging him into the air. Rui leapt up to catch Sakura, while Hitomi landed smoothly, hands in pockets. With all code breakers now present, Toki regained his abilities, but Rei did not. Hitomi's goal was revenge against Eden. He had changed. He used to despise revenge. If Hitomi fell into evil, Rei would not hesitate to cut him down. Rei swung his sword wildly, but couldn't harm Hitomi. Toki launched a power attack, which was merely an annoyance to Hitomi. In the next second, Rei's abilities returned, sword in one hand, blazing fire in the other. Together, they attacked Hitomi to no avail. Hitomi's target was Sakura. Rui and Heike stepped forward as Hitomi prepared to annihilate them with his overwhelming strength. Just then, Sakura stepped in front of everyone and took Hitomi's attack head-on, yet remained unharmed. Hitomi, short on time to continue playing games, realized they had already lost from the moment they gathered. The Prime Minister had been kidnapped by Yukihina. Afterwards, Hitomi left the scene. Toki, as his son, wasn't worried but instead left on his own. Yuki entered a lost form, turning into a little kitten. Most astonishingly, Sakura had taken Hitomi's attack without a scratch. Hitomi, a power user with electric abilities who could manipulate the bodies of the dead, was originally the leader of the Code Breakers. He had disappeared years ago for unknown reasons and had returned as if he were a changed man. The kidnapping of the Prime Minister was just a step in his plan. Toki went home, concerned about his sister Nenene's safety, but she was unharmed. Toki briefly patted her head before leaving. At Sakura's house, it seemed her parents were hiding something. When the room was empty, Rei went in to look through the photo album. Sakura explained that there were no pictures of her at birth in the album because she was an adopted child. Her parents mentioned that when they found her, she was covered in blood but fortunately unharmed. All they wanted was for their child to be well, so they asked Rei to protect Sakura, but Rei did not respond. The next day, all members of Codebreaker assembled again, preparing to split up to search for the Prime Minister and Hitomi's whereabouts. Rei took Sakura to a place where he had previously carried out a mission, but they found no clues and he ended up leaving Sakura behind. Kanda reported Hitomi's actions to the higher-ups. On a footbridge, Rui harbored doubts about Heiki because, once the Codebreakers assembled, the Prime Minister's security would be compromised, a fact Heike would surely be aware of. He confronted this directly. Just as Heike was about to attack, the bridge exploded. Rui, who could control shadows, used her ability to support the bridge while Heike launched his attack. Rui's fate was unknown. Yuki witnessed all of this. Sakura encountered Heike on the street, and he took her to a place filled with clocks. Before her was the kidnapped Prime Minister. At that moment, Heike was speaking to a man on the couch. It was Hitomi. Sakura was shocked to realize that Heike had betrayed the Codebreakers. To show his sincerity, he had brought Sakura to Hitomi. Meanwhile, Rei learned from Kanda about the city bombing incident and guessed it was Hitomi's doing. Hitomi sat expressionless on the couch, watching a TV report on the casualty numbers from the explosion. Perhaps exactly what he wanted to see. However, this was far from enough for him. Hitomi opened the door. He hadn't expected Heike to actually bring Sakura to him. Heike believed that helping Ace was his duty, something he had been doing from the beginning, unbeknownst to Sakura. Initially, it was Heike, and recently arranging Rei to attend that school was also to protect her, though Rei seemed unaware. All these were meticulously planned by the Prime Minister to thwart Hitomi's plans. Hitomi wouldn't harm Sakura. He just hoped she would behave because she was unique, her abilities a mystery. Hitomi's plan involved the explosions reported on TV, but he claimed it was to save the codebreakers. Elsewhere, Kanda was driving, believing that Hitomi must have had his reasons for his actions, knowing all too well his gentle nature. Suddenly, Kanda received a mysterious email, which she immediately reported to Rei. Strangely, Rei had received the same email. Inside Hitomi's base, Heike knew that the bombs placed around the city were far from the only ones. The real drama was just beginning. Hitomi didn't fully trust Heike since he could easily find this base, hinting that Heike was not simple. Hitomi began to doubt him. Heike knew of this base because he had used an intelligence network and had almost driven Hitomi into a corner until he realized Hitomi's true intentions. He felt it would be a pity for Eden to capture Hitomi, so he decided to help him by bringing Sakura and sacrificing Hachiuji Rui. At that moment, Hitomi's gaze sharpened. Sakura heard this and couldn't believe it, and neither could Hitomi, knowing that Heike cherished the code breakers more than anyone. The reason Heike acted as he did was because he understood Hitomi's anger and sadness better than anyone else. Just then, through the window, Hitomi noticed Kanda's arrival. If Kanda had come, it meant Rei would soon be there too, indicating that a necessary conflict was unavoidable. Suddenly, Hitomi asked Heike to do something for him. Outside, Kanda watched the lights in the upper floors of the building, then rushed in. By a staircase, Kanda saw Heike and was puzzled to find him there. Elsewhere, Rei was running towards Hitomi's base when his phone rang. It was Sakura's parents on the line, unable to contact her and worried something might have happened. Then, from behind Rei, Yuki's voice came, breathlessly telling him about Heike's betrayal. Heike had delivered a fatal blow to Rui. When Yuki arrived at the scene, all he found was a pile of rocks with Rui's motorcycle crushed underneath. At that moment, Rei seemed to understand something. They arrived at Hitomi's base and opened the door. Heike had been waiting by the staircase for a long time and was surprised to see Yuki as well. Yuki asked Heike what he had done to Rui, and realizing his oversight, Heike understood. Rei wanted to clarify the situation, but Heike launched a power attack directly at them. Yuki now fully believed Heike had betrayed them and launched a power attack of his own, which Heike easily neutralized. Heike was very familiar with Yuki's powers and had no trouble evading them. Rei, taking advantage of Heike being distracted, threw a punch, but Heike dodged it and began his counterattack. He used his powers to bind Rei's hands and then slammed him against a wall. Enduring the pain, Rei used his powers to burn off Heike's power, surprising Heike. Afterward, Rei attacked Heike continuously with his powers. Rei showed no mercy to the person blocking his path. Heike pointed upstairs, eagerly anticipating the plan unfolding there. Rei was puzzled, but Yuki told him to go upstairs and leave this to him. Yuki launched an attack, but it was blocked by a stone. On the other side, Rei ran up the stairs to the second floor, where he saw Kanda standing, but did not see Hitomi. Something was off about Kanda. She raised her gun towards Rei. It was then revealed that Kanda was being controlled by someone. Beside her, with his hands tied, was Sakura, and Hitomi was using electric shocks to send commands to Kanda's brain. A simpler task than controlling a corpse. Rei's left hand emitted a strange fire. Hitomi used Kanda as a shield. Suddenly, Kanda spoke, urging Rei to escape quickly. Rei used the flames to block the bullets. Hitomi instructed Kanda that if all bullets were blocked, the last one would end her own life. If Rei chose to be shot and die, Hitomi's control over Kanda would end, and she would not have to die. Beside her, Sakura thought Hitomi was despicable. However, Hitomi didn't see it that way. Sakura couldn't understand why Hitomi would do such a thing, given that the three of them used to be close friends. Rei wouldn't let Kanda commit suicide. He decided to use his own hand to end it for her. Hitomi was well aware of Rei's style and was curious to see if Rei could actually go through with it. Consequently, he took full control of Kanda with a strong current, making her fire several shots at the approaching Rei, all of which were blocked by Rei's flames. Sakura tried to stop Rei, desperately struggling to free her hands. At this moment, a small dog seemed to understand everything and went to help Sakura. When there was only one bullet left in Kanda's gun, Sakura, glowing with a white light, saved Kanda. Hitomi was shocked. The rescued Kanda regained consciousness and broke free from the control with strong emotions. Hitomi praised Sakura, while Rei wondered what Hitomi was planning. Hitomi walked up to a wall and questioned them. "Don't you understand yet?" Sakura then realized that the wall was covered with stopped clocks, marking the times when former Code Breaker members had died. Hitomi pointed to each, remembering them clearly because, being non-existent, they weren't allowed to have tombstones. At least this way, he could remember they died fighting against evil. Now Hitomi wanted to end it all. The Prime Minister was the one issuing the missions, and before executing him, many would die, plunging people into fear. With his death, many more would die, imprinting fear into the memories of those living under a facade of peace, making them long for a force that could eradicate criminals. That force being the Code Breakers. This way, the Code Breakers wouldn't just fade away silently. Once everything was over, Hitomi planned to proclaim himself as the righteous Code Breaker, openly punishing evil. Hitomi invited Rei to join him, but he decisively refused. The Code Breakers that eradicated evil were also murderers. He used his powers to destroy all the clocks. Hitomi was past the point of return and prepared to enact his plan to free the Code Breakers from Eden's chains. Suddenly, Yukihina released a wall of ice to block their confrontation. Rei leaped up in a surprise attack, and Yukihina shot out ice spikes, sending Rei flying. Hitomi decided to leave first. Kanda and Rei tried to stop him, but the ice spikes were directed at Sakura. Rei couldn't protect her in time, but at the last moment, Toki blocked them with a flame stone. Sakura, disregarding the danger, chased after them. Heike, sensing trouble, also retreated. Later, in a car, Yukihina, Hitomi, Heike, and Sakura were all inside. Seeing the changes in him, they wondered what had happened in his past. Previously, when Eden decided to appoint the 16-year-old Hitomi as the 6th Code Breaker during a mission, Hitomi saved a young Kanda. Later, he came to this lawn, watching children play, wanting to create a world where no one would have to cry or be sad. Heike was willing to help. At that time, Hitomi was 20 years old, and they were on a mission. The target was about to pass through an intersection when suddenly, Hitomi heard the 5th Code Breaker, Haruya, screaming. Hitomi rushed over to find Haruya impaled against a wall with steel rods. In a cafe, Haruya's watch, forever stopped at 1:20 a.m., lay on the table. With his death, Hitomi was promoted to the 5th position. Later, sitting on that lawn with a bitter face, he convinced himself that all this was to protect everyone's smiles. Time passes in an instant. Hitomi is now ranked 3rd and is 26 years old. This time, the enemy is formidable. A group of power users who had once betrayed Eden. The mission is to annihilate them. The leader is a man who can release flames, who destroyed an entire floor. Amidst the roaring blaze, a man emerged, throwing out what was once the first-ranked Code Breaker. The rest of his companions were burned to ashes. There were rumors of Hitomi's formidable strength, and some wanted to see it for themselves. After a flash of light, the surroundings were filled with charred corpses. Hitomi couldn't bear to look directly. Back at headquarters, Hitomi witnessed a strange scene during a mission, the 6th-ranked being killed by their own power. He asked Heike to investigate. Now, only the 2 of them remained, followed by the appearance of the 4th-ranked Toki, 5th-ranked Rui, and 6th-ranked Rei. Later, Heike located the man who could release flames, and all the Code Breaker members mobilized. Hitomi arrived at the man's room, with others soon following. The man invited them to join him, but they refused. They could not condone evil. The 2 launched an attack, and the man, looking smug, thought he had killed Hitomi. But the next second, Hitomi was unharmed. Hitomi would not let him kill anyone else. Suddenly, his body moved uncontrollably. When Hitomi had touched him earlier, he had sent a command to the man's brain, using his own power to burn himself to ashes. Downstairs, Hitomi looked at this group, believing they could become the strongest team, and now no one else would have to die. Everyone could rest assured. But reality is often cruel. Heike found some information about power users losing control. As the intervals of lost state increased, the powers would spiral out of control, leading to death. Such incidents had already happened many times, termed by Eden as Code End. Hitomi struggled to calm himself. He thought no one would die anymore, but now fate intervened. Eden had also intentionally concealed all this. Later, Hitomi called Rei out, intending to invite him to escape together. But after careful thought, they had no parents, no siblings, and could never express their feelings to their loved ones, even in death. Even if they could escape, they would only be fugitives until their deaths. To live on as a code breaker meant a death sentence once they knew the truth. So Hitomi wanted them to live ordinary lives, even if it meant negotiating face-to-face with the Prime Minister. For these children, Hitomi planned to take everything upon himself. The next day, Rei received a call. Last night, Hitomi had attacked the Prime Minister, killed many agents, and fled. His whereabouts were now unknown. Eden had put Hitomi on a special wanted list. Returning to the present, Sakura was strung up. The Prime Minister would be executed in an hour, and bombs had been planted everywhere. Multiple bomb incidents occurred in the city. Yuki used his power to sense the locations of the bombs, realizing they were densely packed around. Heike knew it was impossible to defuse all the bombs within an hour. This was the effect Hitomi wanted, to let people experience fear while waiting for destruction, making them long for the justice known as Code Breaker. Meanwhile, they located the long-missing Sakura in a sky tower. Gotoku received an email about the locations of the bombs. After some thought, he chose to save lives first, instructing his men to coordinate with local bosses to send their people, while the police also received instructions to assist in defusing the bombs. But there are still many bombs left, and time is running out. On the other side, Kanda and others also received this email and notified Eden. They discovered from surveillance that the Prime Minister was on top of the sky tower. Kanda and her team received orders to proceed with the rescue. Seeing the people injured by the bombs, Yuki decided to stay and defuse the bombs while Toki drove away. On another front, Rei arrived at the sky tower and drew his samurai sword to attack. After several exchanges, Hitomi quickly realized that Rei was using his flames to direct the electrical attacks to the ground to avoid electrocution. But this alone was not enough to win. Hitomi attacked Rei from all directions simultaneously, making it impossible for Rei to use his flames to avoid the electrical shocks. Sakura wanted to help. She had the dog bite through her ropes. Although the dog successfully dropped down, it couldn't reach Sakura's ropes. However, Sakura didn't give up and thought of a clever way. Rei, fighting desperately with his sword against Hitomi's attacks, refused to yield. Coincidentally, an electrical shock broke Sakura's ropes, and she fell from above. After the attack ended, Rei didn't understand why Hitomi had attempted to assassinate the Prime Minister that day. In reality, he was there to negotiate. The Prime Minister couldn't accept Hitomi's demands. Hitomi was firm in his stance, so the Prime Minister sent agents to attack him. In the chaos, Hitomi accidentally killed some agents. Eden deliberately released false information to frame Hitomi as a villain and expel him from the Code Breakers. Although it seemed dreadful, there was no other way. Moreover, Hitomi's actions were not just for the Code Breakers, but also for the children with powers being used as research subjects. He didn't want these children to become the state's killing machines, so Hitomi wanted to save all future generations of those with powers. On another side, Toki prepared to take the elevator up, but Heike arrived to stop him. Toki had always thought Heike was a good person, and was surprised by his betrayal. Suddenly, Toki began to laugh crazily. "Showtime has started!" Kanda tried to make them stop fighting, but it was futile. Heike intended to teach Toki a lesson, releasing duplicates with increased strength and powers. Toki could only dodge and think of a strategy while being repeatedly taunted by Heike. Angered, Toki blindly attacked and was caught by Heike, but he cleverly used his powers to escape the bind and counterattack. The two charged at each other, each landing a punch before Heike, back on the ground, started taunting Toki again. In the process, Toki used up a lot of his powers and was quickly approaching his lost state. The real Heike, hidden behind a pillar, was ready to end the game. Meanwhile, Yukihina was sent to rescue the children with powers. Just as he entered, he was stopped by someone he didn't expect to still be alive. On the other side, Hitomi unleashed a powerful current on Rei, then threw him out. Knowing that Rei had realized the true nature of the organization, Hitomi invited him to join. Rei couldn't accept sacrificing others' lives to achieve his goals. He was willing to protect people and fight to the last. This was also what Hitomi once hoped for. Since that was the case, Hitomi decided to end it by his own hand. Suddenly, Rei's expression became extremely painful. It looked like he was about to enter his lost state. Just as Hitomi was about to deliver the final blow, Sakura ran up and shielded him with her body, as she was immune to the powers. Hitomi then grabbed Sakura by the neck, letting them witness the birth of a new world together. The time for the explosion had come, but there was no sign of disturbance in the city. It turned out this was Heike's doing. He had ordered Yuki to destroy the vehicle that was to send the explosion signal and had moved all the children with powers to safety. Rui was just delaying time. Seeing that Yuki had also arrived, Yukihina had no choice but to retreat. But this was not the end. Hitomi had prepared a final measure. He planned to use an electric shock from the sky tower to send out radio waves to detonate the bombs. Just as Hitomi was about to succeed, shadows enveloped the entire tower, preventing the radio waves from being emitted. Then Rui rode her motorcycle through the glass and flew in, followed closely by Yuki. Hitomi used an electric shock to knock Rui away, and the shadows disappeared. Yuki intervened to stop him, forcing Hitomi to use even greater power to repel them. At this moment, Kanda and Toki arrived to stop Hitomi, but both were thrown back by his electric shocks. Sakura then rushed up to plead with him to stop, which only enraged Hitomi further. He grabbed Sakura by the neck with both hands. Suddenly, Hitomi sensed danger. Rei pulled off a ring from his hand, releasing a powerful and terrifying force. Against Hitomi's electric shocks, he used flames to engulf them. This scene shocked everyone. Rei was completely different from before. Still, Hitomi did not give up. He released a powerful electric shock upwards, which Rei quickly countered by consuming the shocks with flames. The flames then seized Hitomi's body. At this moment, Rei's expression turned sad as he delivered his strongest strike. Hitomi was not burned to ashes but simply collapsed to the ground, and Rei also fell down, exhausted. When Hitomi awoke, he pushed Kanda away as a massive amount of electricity surged through his body, attacking him like wild beasts. This condition was known as Code End. Despite being unable to activate the bombs, Hitomi was determined to kill the Prime Minister himself. Rei punched to stop him, and finally, Hitomi was pinned against a pillar. Suddenly, the electricity inside him burst out. To avoid involving others, Hitomi bore all this alone. Deep down, he still hoped that everyone could live together under the sunlight, so no one would have to die alone. At this moment, the Prime Minister appeared, his words cutting into Hitomi like a knife. Seeing him, Hitomi finally exploded. At the critical moment, everyone used their powers to stop Hitomi, not wanting to see him continue down the wrong path. Hitomi came to his senses, and his heavy body slowly fell, releasing electricity that formed a large bird spreading its wings. Everyone mourned for Hitomi. Only the Prime Minister looked pleased. Unable to hold back, Toki punched him. With that, the matter came to an end. Rei left alone. Outside, the people thought they were protected by the police, not knowing it was the code breakers. In a car, the Prime Minister told Heike that all of this was his plan. The reason for choosing Hitomi as a code breaker was to develop Rei and the rare Sakura. Sakura could be immune to all powers, thus able to restrain Rei. By clashing Rei with Hitomi, they successfully unleashed his true power. Now that all the pieces against the Seekers were in place, the Prime Minister had barely started to celebrate when he was suddenly struck by an electric shock, spitting out a mouthful of blood. This was a residual electric shock left inside him by Hitomi before his death. Seeing the Prime Minister in such a sorry state, Toki and Heike unusually cracked a smile. The next morning, Sakura thought Rei was waiting for her around the corner. When she went to check, it was Yuki's voice she heard instead. He had come to say goodbye to Sakura, and then he flew away using his power. Under the stairs, Rui was waiting for Sakura on her motorcycle. After giving her a ride, Rui told Sakura that they too would be assigned to work in different places. Rui was also there to say goodbye. Seeing Rui smile, a rare sight, Sakura even complimented her on how beautiful her smile was. After Rui left, Sakura sat on a chair waiting for the bus. The dog seemed to sense her feelings, licking her hand and then lying beside it. Suddenly, Toki appeared. Sakura quickly wiped away her tears. On the bus, Toki mischievously reached for Sakura's chest, which ended disastrously for him. Seeing Sakura's fierce reaction, he initially wanted to tell her about some information regarding Rei. Hearing Rei's name made Sakura very excited. Seeing her so agitated, Toki felt a bit jealous. Through his description, Sakura learned that Rei had already moved to the next place. However, after that, Sakura stopped listening to Toki and looked out the bus window, seemingly struck by a thought. Watching Sakura get off, Toki muttered a farewell phrase to himself. Afterwards, Sakura returned to the park where she and Rei had first met.